Everybody. My name is Brooklyn. I'm part of the team here at Hope, and it's great to be here with you this morning. Not only do I have the fun privilege of serving as our young adult director here at Hope, but I also have a super fun hobby job. So I work in a restaurant in Times Square a couple times a week just for fun. Now, one of my favorite things about this hobby job is a tradition that actually started 7 years ago. So I first worked at the restaurant in 2018, and I realized that it was actually kind of hard to get to know people that I was working with. And I realized how much I was hoping for community in the workplace. So I started putting a quote and a question of the night at the host stand. It's a fun way of getting to learn a little bit more about people I work with to understand them a little bit better. The ways that they interpret the question, for one, could be a little different than the way I went in with that question. The things that they're hoping for come out, the things that bring them joy, the things that make people laugh. Very simple type questions sometimes. Sometimes they're a little harder. But every once in a while, I try to ask a question that stops people in their tracks just enough. One that lingers a little bit throughout the shift that we keep coming back to, that causes people to just consider maybe something that they haven't considered before. And I can't say for sure, but I think Question of the Night is one of the best tools that I've ever used to get to know people. So when we actually started a Monday night small group here at Hope, we started it with questions. My co-lead has a few of those card-like question games, kind of like We're Not Really Strangers, and we lean into those each week as a way of, kind of getting beneath the surface to the regular, how's it going, what do you do for work kinds of questions. Sometimes these questions bring joy and excitement. Sometimes they hit at harder things or cause us to share different, deeper parts of our story. And other times they bring out things that person didn't even know about themselves to begin with. So have you ever been asked that kind of question, one that kind of makes you sit back and think, that's a good question. I need to think about that for a little bit. We are actually starting a new series today called Good Question. We're going to be spending the rest of the summer looking at some of the many questions that Jesus asked. Jesus, throughout his recorded ministry in the Gospels, in the New Testament books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he's known around town as a great teacher. And many people rightly come to him with questions about life, meaning, spirituality, relationships. But what's striking is that Jesus often responds to these questions with other questions. In fact, across the Gospel accounts, he's quoted as asking 135 questions. These weren't just clarifying questions, but they were ones that cut to the heart of the matter, exposed assumptions, and invited his listeners to think differently. So today, we're going to look at one of those moments, one of those questions. In John's Gospel, in chapter 5, Jesus, as we just heard, walks up to a man who's been invalid for 38 years. For almost 4 decades, he's been in pain or waiting for some kind of healing and likely experiencing some kind of disappointment. And Jesus asks him something that kind of seems jarring and obvious to us. Do you want to get well? But before we dive into that question, I think it's important for us to pause and get a feel for kind of the moment that Jesus is stepping into. He's not asking this question out of nowhere. The people around him, the setting, the place, all matters to give us a little bit of context for what's happening. So as it starts in the first couple of verses, we're told that this story takes place in Jerusalem at a pool called Bethesda. This pool was a pretty popular spot amongst the blind, the lame, the paralyzed, and other folks with disabilities. And it was popular because they were coming to find healing and were holding on to the hope that this pool would bring them just that. Depending on your version of the Bible that you have, you may notice this little part on verse 3 and 4 is actually a footnote in some Bibles, and it isn't found in the oldest transcripts. However, some later versions include it as a kind of note at, hey, this is the cultural, what's going on. So we're going to add it in this sidebar, and then it got translated into the main. And it was just to say that from time to time, the water stirred, something was happening, and people got healed. And the man who we encounter in this story was holding on to that same hope. We hear that in his answer in verse 7, where he says, I have no one to help me when the water is stirred. So there's some sort of cultural understanding that this pool is a place where healing can happen. So maybe something was happening. Maybe the waters were stirring. Maybe people did get healed. And I'm guessing this man had watched as dozens of others got there before him. He listened to the splash as people were getting in, waiting for the chance that it would be his turn. And yet, for some reason, he stays there, day after day, year after year, waiting and hoping, believing that maybe next time would be his turn. And if we're honest, I wonder if most of us know something about that kind of ache. We may not be waiting beside a pool that promises healing, but maybe we are waiting on something, a breakthrough, a physical healing, a healing in a relationship, some sense of peace in our life. Some of us have been pushing through for years, telling ourselves, if I just work harder, if I can just keep it together a little longer, maybe things will finally shift and I'll be better than I am today. And I think New York rewards that mindset. We celebrate hustle and independence and self-reliance. We've normalized burnout and pride ourselves on being self-made and emotionally independent. We're constantly moving, always trying to be the first into the water, first to get the job, first to make it, first to heal ourselves. And if we don't make it, we'll just try again tomorrow. And when pushing through doesn't work, we go searching for our own pools of Bethesda. Maybe we doom scroll looking for distractions and sometimes stumble across something that looks like it might have answers. Maybe it's that TikTok tarot reader or one of those videos that starts with, God told me to tell you. And somehow it feeds right into our delusions. Anyone else know exactly what I'm talking about? Yeah. We download dating apps to seek wholeness in someone else. We start working on a personal rebrand. We buy supplements. We enter our wellness era. We make vision boards. We journal our manifestations. Or maybe we drink too much. We hook up to just not feel alone. Or we numb out with whatever is easiest to access. Alcohol, weed, a string of nights that we won't remember. We become high-functioning people carrying deep inner pain. We'll try almost anything to feel better, to feel whole, and to believe that healing is still possible. But beneath it all, we're tired and aching, wondering if we're ever going to get there, still trying to be the first in the water, whatever version of the pool that might be. I believe this is the space the man is in when Jesus walks up to him. And maybe this space is where Jesus is walking into our lives too, asking us the same piercing question: do you want to get well? I know this space fairly well. So I grew up a pastor's kid, and I was around church a lot. And not just on Sunday mornings and doing the regular kind of program of the church, but also the behind-the-scenes kind of church stuff. And if I'm honest, it was pretty painful. There was abuse and cover-ups. I saw the ways that the church really hurt people and how that pain was often brushed under the rug in Jesus' name. And as I entered adulthood, I stopped trying to pretend it didn't affect me. After a particularly challenging season as a pastor's kid and as an adult in ministry myself, I slowly started looking for healing in other places, and the approval of others, and being the most helpful, and becoming the person who made everything better for everyone else. I threw myself into coworker community and party culture, hoping that maybe if I was enough, fun enough, supportive enough, present enough, then maybe I could finally feel okay. I was trying so hard to be the one who made it into the pool first, but underneath all of it, I was tired, and nothing was actually healing me. Now, at first glance, this question seems obvious. Of course, this man in the story wants to get well. But this question cuts more to the heart of the matter and exposes some different assumptions. Jesus' question, do you want to get well, forces us to answer that question. Do you want to? The desire question. Again, it seems obvious at first. Of course I want to get well, Jesus. I'm laying here. I'm weak. I can't move. Of course I want to get up. But that is not how this guy answers the question. Instead, he responds by saying, "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Instead of yes or no, I want to get healed or I don't, this man gives what feels like a perfectly valid reason for his stuckness. I have no one to help me, I'm alone, and I'm too slow. Someone else makes it in first. And maybe you've experienced that too. Maybe you're carrying the ache of isolation, like no one sees you and no one's coming for you to help move you towards healing. Maybe you felt that frustration of really trying to get better. You want to get better, but then anxiety creeps back in. Or you've made progress, but then addiction somehow comes knocking again. You've opened yourself up for a relationship, but then you get ghosted again. You prayed, but the silence is really deafening. This man had been laying in this condition for a long time. The Bible tells us he'd been this way for 38 years. That's older than I am. That's a long time. And I wonder if there was something about his condition that felt safe for him. His invalidness was the main thing that he could rely on. His identity was as the guy on the mat by the pool, waiting. So this question, do you want to get well, might have felt a little bit risky. Jesus was asking a question that could change the trajectory of this man's life, the life that he always knew, and the life that he'd grown accustomed to. And maybe you can relate. Maybe for you, the brokenness and pain has been part of your story for a long time. And to answer honestly, do you want to get well, is vulnerable. Because you don't know what's on the other side of the story you've lived for so long. To be healed means that something is going to be disrupted. And change can be pretty scary when all we've known is one thing. So when this man answers Jesus, I see that he's ignoring the question, but I think that's because admitting that he wants to be healed leaves him open to a lot of vulnerability. He's either going to say yes, and Jesus is going to heal him, pretty scary, or he's going to say yes, and nothing is going to happen, and that's also kind of scary. Do you want to get well? Is an incredibly personal and vulnerable question, even though the answer seems pretty obvious. Maybe you hear this man's answer here in verse 7 and hear a lot of excuses, but I don't think he was trying to be dramatic or sassy. I think he was being just really honest. And Jesus doesn't rebuke him for it. There's no shame. He doesn't say, well, you could have tried harder. Instead, Jesus looks at him and sees him, and then he heals him. Jesus speaks, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Just like that. And he does. After 38 years, this man stands up. Can you imagine trying to use your legs for the first time? This man's healing, though, doesn't come in the way that he had expected it to. He thought his pool of Bethesda was the way towards wholeness. And Jesus fully bypasses this method by which the man assumed his healing would come. Healing wasn't about getting somewhere fast enough, or getting there first, or having the right people around him to help him in. In fact, this man's healing actually had nothing to do with his own efforts. His healing started because Jesus saw him lying there. And Jesus sees him and makes a move towards him and asks him a question that changes his life. Maybe our healing isn't found in the pools that we've been staring at. Maybe it's not in getting it all together, not in the career move or that relationship that you think will finally make you feel wanted. Maybe not even in the sense of peace that you've been chasing through self-help and podcasts or through drugs and alcohol. Maybe healing starts when you realize that Jesus is already walking towards you. He's not waiting for you to do more. He's simply asking, do you want to get well? Not to shame you, not to test you, but to invite you in. And notice that he's not asking, how will you get well? Or why did you continue to stay here? He's just asking, do you want to? And I think it's okay if our answers feel complicated, like the guy in this story. It's okay if your first response is, I'm really tired. I've tried. I'm alone. I don't know what else to do. Jesus doesn't shame honesty. He honors it. It's not about getting to the water fast enough, but it's actually about Jesus, the living water, coming near to you. The good news of the gospel is that Jesus sees you and he moves towards you, and he brings healing in ways that we didn't think were possible and in ways that we don't always expect, and sometimes at a pace we don't always choose. The text here says at once, and the man was healed. Not eventually, not after a few good performance weeks, not once he proved he was ready, but at once he picks up his mat, the very thing that symbolized his stuckness, and he walks. I think this is the beautiful and sometimes frustrating truth of life with Jesus, is that sometimes healing does come in a moment. And sometimes it comes slowly over years, and sometimes it doesn't come in the ways that we had hoped it would. There were a lot of other people at the pool, and Jesus only immediately heals this one man. Sometimes that doesn't seem fair, and it doesn't feel efficient, but I think that's a good indicator of real life, and it points us to something bigger and this bigger truth about Jesus and the kingdom of heaven. This is what theologians call the already and the not yet kingdom of God, where Jesus has already come, he's already conquered sin and death, he's already made healing possible, but yet we're still waiting for the fullness of that healing. We live in the in-between, where hope is real and heartache still lingers, where miracles happen and prayers go unanswered, where we are held by the healer even when we're still hurting. And Jesus moves towards us in it all. Sometimes Jesus moves towards us through people, a friend who checks in on us at just the right time, a stranger who sees you, a church that makes room for your questions, or through someone's story that feels a lot like your own. Sometimes Jesus moves towards us by disrupting the timeline that we had for our own healing, by refusing to rush the process and choosing to be near in the waiting. And sometimes the healing we want isn't the healing that Jesus heals first. We want the pain to stop, but maybe Jesus wants to teach us to be present to our pain. We want answers, but sometimes they don't come. We want resolution, but Jesus might be cultivating resilience in us. We want to walk again, but he's starting a little slower. When we forget how to believe, I think one of the beautiful things about church community and faith community is that we can borrow faith from someone else. When we feel unseen, God often shows up to me through someone who remembers my name, holds space for my story, or prays with me when I don't have the words. We don't always get to choose how Jesus heals us, but we do get to choose to stay open, to be seen, to be loved, and to let go of our timeline and trust that just maybe he's doing something deeper than we could have imagined. The promise isn't that everything's going to be fixed overnight. The promise is not that we are not in it alone, that the healer is with us and he's not finished yet. In my own story, I think some things started to shift during a particularly challenging season when I finally admitted that I was tired of trying to fix a lot of things in me on my own. I'd actually been attending Hope Church, and the Alpha course was about to start, and I was curious. Alpha is a space to ask questions about Jesus and about church and about faith and the big questions of life. And I went mostly because I didn't know what else to do. It had been almost 2 years of my own deconstruction spiral, and I was at a real loss. It took me 2 Alpha courses, but it was in that room around a table of people who were just honest about life, who weren't pretending to have it all together, that I started to slowly let my guard down, just enough, just a little. I asked honest questions out loud for the first time. I cried, I doubted, and little by little, Jesus began to restore me from the inside out. He met me, not with shame, but with compassion. He just kept showing up with lots of love and truth and true healing. It's still pretty crazy to me that I actually work at a church now. There's real pain that I carry from church, the way it's missed the mark, caused harm, and looked nothing like Jesus. And yet, it's also through the church, the gathered, imperfect people of God, that I have tangibly experienced his healing and his restoration. I think that's part of the mystery. The church is broken, and yet it's still the body of Christ. And it's in that tension, both the ache and the beauty, the wounds and the healing, that I personally still hear Jesus' invitation, where I don't have to prove myself worthy of healing, but am I willing to be seen and to answer honestly, do I want to get well? Get up, pick up your mat, walk. And this story doesn't end just with a miracle, because the moment this man stands up, everything changes. And people notice, especially the religious leaders. Later in John 5, the Jewish leaders ask this guy, hey, what's going on? Because now he's breaking the rules by carrying his mat on the Sabbath. And they want to know kind of what's going on, what happened, who healed you. And what's crazy is this man doesn't actually know who healed him. He's asked, who healed you? And he's like, some guy? I don't know. But what's so profound is that this guy's faith then didn't heal him. He didn't have faith in who Jesus was. It was Jesus' mercy and compassion that healed him. Later, actually, though, Jesus isn't done just then. He kind of disappears into the crowd. And then a few verses later, in verse 14, we learn that Jesus finds him at the temple. So he finds him again and says, see, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Jesus finds him again because healing was never just about his legs. It was about his life. Jesus didn't want to just make him feel better. He wanted to make him whole. And that's what he wants for us too. Not just relief, but renewal. Not just healing for what's visible, but healing for the parts of us that no one else sees. And this man, he couldn't keep it to himself. He didn't stay silent, because when Jesus heals you, when he sees you and when he moves towards you, it eventually leads to the question, who is that guy? Is he just a teacher, a nice healer, a spiritual guru, or is he really who he says he is? The Son of God, the one who sees, who heals, walks with us, and invites us into something greater. Jesus found this man twice, and he's still finding us today. The man didn't know everything about Jesus. He didn't have a long theological explanation for what had happened. He just knew this. I was stuck, I was overlooked, and I was unable to move, and now I'm walking. So when people asked who healed you, he could finally tell them the truth once he saw Jesus after that second time and say, it was Jesus. So friends, if we've encountered Jesus, if we've been seen, comforted, changed, healed, how can we keep that to ourselves? Our healing can be part of someone else's hope. Our stories can be a signpost pointing back to the one who heals. And that's part of why I get to stand here and tell my own story. Not because I have it all figured out, not because everything in my own brokenness has been made instantly whole, but because I've encountered the healing of Jesus, and I still encounter the healing of Jesus. There are still days I hear him ask, do you want to get well, Brooklyn? Not in a shameful way, but in a way that invites me into deeper wholeness. Healing has not been linear. It hasn't been easy. But I can stand here truthfully and say it's been very real in my life. And now I get to tell the truth, that Jesus still sees, still heals, still restores, even when the church has caused me harm, even when the wounds feel really deep. My story is living proof that he's not done. We live in a city full of people lying beside their own pools, aching to be seen, trying everything to get well, hoping that something will finally work. And maybe you get to be the person that says, I know what that ache feels like, but I've also met someone who sees it, someone who sees me, and I think he sees you too. You don't have to have all the answers. You just get to tell the truth about what Jesus has done, because once you've been healed by Jesus, you're sent by Jesus too, into your office, your family, your friend group, to carry that same healing presence and hope for others still waiting by the water.